Folks, this is Herb Stevenson. The next session of Natural Passages Revealing the Unmarked Doors of Life. Um, what I want to talk about today is may seem a little odd, but it's about silence and how do we develop mindfulness. Um, One of the most difficult things many people have is how do you sit in silence? And um, often not aware that actually in the deepest silence resides our presence, who we truly are. And I give you an example of this. I frequently ask my clients, regardless of the source of whether it be corporate clients or otherwise, is that they sit for 5 minutes a day in silence. If you need to have soft music in the background, but it's the idea just to sit. And what ends up happening, the mind begins to recalibrate and it begins to relax. But it's very difficult for many people to do that. So I want to go over the process of what to think about it, because you go through a series of stages actually before you get the mind to be quiet. And you begin to appreciate the absolute silence is very useful. So understanding silence, and we kind of, in a way, understand it, but in another way, we don't. And when I say that, silence is like water to a fish, uh, and as a result, presence is the same way. Presence is to silence the same way that water is to a fish. The more silent we become, the quieter our mind, the more we literally are present. So our presence resides in the silence, while our mind resides in our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and senses. So when the mind gets completely quiet and we're in silence, we are actually more present to ourselves. And a frequent comment that people will make to me when they begin to really understand that is that they feel more like themselves. They feel more centered. They feel more in their body. They have more awareness of just being who they are. Whereas if the mind is constantly going on, we're either dealing with thoughts, feelings, emotion, or senses, and in a constant state of stimulus overload. So in spiritual terms, and a lot of people say, well, yeah, I don't really understand this, but silence is a space between. And as a space in between um, is where we truly find ourselves. We're not chasing thoughts. Our whole life, we've been taught to have thoughts guide us, save us, protect us, help us be successful. And in truth, what we really need to understand is the mind. A way I like to do it, and this is may seem a little academic, but the mind is an evolving biological learning experience that leaves the original silence of presence to create itself, thereby forgetting its source. So the mind basically moves us away from the core part of who we really are. And that's very difficult for many people because their mind never gets quiet because they actually completely identify with themselves as whatever is going on inside their brain housing group, so to speak. And it's not who you are. Those are just simply programs you've created in order to orient within the world. Those programs are very helpful, but they shouldn't be controlling your identity and everything else about who you are. So one of the things I put together is the 5 stages of the mind is to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, and hopefully you can appreciate and maybe recognize yourself. Stage one for most people when they begin to try to do meditation or have 5 minutes of silence is called the monkey mind. Others have various other phrases for it, but it's basically rambling thoughts with no conscious awareness. We're just following thoughts. And those thoughts are saying, well, I need to do this or I need to do that. And it's also where we get into rumination, which we just can't let go of a trend of thought or fear. If we get past that, we go to the reflexive mind, which you perform without conscious awareness of the thought process, but it again is spinning. It's very reflexive and internal. But as we develop more capacity to just sit in silence or in a quiet place, we start developing what's called the reflective mind, which my awareness of thoughts, planning interaction between self and society now becomes a process that I'm witnessing myself. And as I begin to create the witness, I can actually separate and realize who I am versus all of my thoughts are two different things. And as you continue to progress, and this frequently happens when people work with me, is you develop the learning mind where you become aware of thoughts, and you're aware that thoughts actually create reality, and you begin to master them. In other words, you are now in control of what you think. Now, and I get caught in, we all do this, we get caught in something that triggers us from the past, and we start ruminating and we go into almost crisis mode where we're coming up with every possible alternative to counter whatever you think of what someone has done to you or is going to do to you, and you go into over preparation and crisis mode. When you get to learning mind and you're witnessing yourself, you realize, I don't have any suicide bomber coming at me. I don't have anything else coming at me. And the question is, how can I just be more present to myself and allow whatever these emotions or energies are to burn off? And frequently when that happens, we suddenly have a memory of an awareness that happened probably years ago that created this pattern of response whenever we feel threatened in some form, whether it's our survival, it could be our job, something of that nature. A common thing when we do get triggered is what the example would be is we feel slighted, or somebody's calling us to the office. We learn that when we're in school. You get called to the office to get paddled. You don't lose that pattern. You continue that when the boss calls you in the office. You have the same reflective type of experience or reactive experience. But when we go one step further, when we become mindful, we're fully present to ourselves while learning to be in a state of silence and solitude as presence or as awareness. And at that point, we're completely receptive to the situation, don't go in with preconceived notions, and are actually able to navigate much better. So one of the things that often happens when I go in and I work with a lot of high-powered executives, I don't have preconceived notions about what the conversation is going to be about. The only thing I'm interested in is listening and making sure I'm absolutely clear about what's going on. And in so doing that, relating in such a way that they can tell I'm very mindful. I'm not negotiating. I don't have hidden agendas. I'm just simply supporting them in their process in that moment. And as a result, we are actually able to connect at a better level. And the impact is we have a better outcome. And this applies to whether you're a leader or you're coaching a leader. And it actually even works just as well at home. So another way to think about this is, and I want to go through this one more step, is the mind. Think about this, all your thoughts, birth, birth as is inborn, noise. Most thoughts are noise. They're noise that we have created to help us navigate. And most people struggle with the ideas, oh my God, that's crazy. Why would you say my thoughts are noise? Well, a good portion of what we worry about is just pure noise because we don't really do anything with them. 90% of the things we worry about never happens. I love Tom Petty's comment about that. His famous poster was that it's 90% of what I worry about never happens. That's the mind is staying in monkey mind or in reflexive mode and is able to move forward. And so another way of looking at that is we're in the monkey mind where our mind is basically belligerent. It's undisciplined mind, full of noise, and it's unaware of silence, and it's unaware of anything else beyond what they're afraid of in that moment. So we develop a little more capacity for developing our capacity to be in silence and present to ourselves is we go into discomfort, which we call the avoidant mind, and we're afraid of silence. A number of people I've asked actually to sit for 1 minute and told me they couldn't even sit for 1 minute was lost in this discomfort because they had never quieted their mind in their entire life. And so it became very, very difficult. And so we just very slowly, I would sit with them and we experience, and sometimes the guided meditations support them to recognize that it is possible. But we have to get through this a third stage, which is desperation. The individual will recognize the silence and is trying to negotiate courage to be in silence, but it's either out of desperation because the pain of what they're doing isn't working, their thoughts being belligerent all the time. And so out of desperation, they actually force themselves into that place. And what's the interesting part is they're creating focused attention from the desperation to move towards how do I recognize silence and negotiate the courage inside myself to be in silence. It may sound counterintuitive, but it's actually part of the process, which leads to the fourth stage, which is courage. I'm aware that silence is important to self-survival, and I actually seek engagement with silence. I begin to not judge that the mind is working all the time. I just acknowledge that it's running off and doing a lot of things. And by the fact that you're just watching it and really not supporting the continuation of that process, whatever it is for you in that moment, begins to lead you to eventually to a place of comfort and presence, which is you're deeply engaged with silence as a spiritual source to oneself. And when I say that, what I'm really saying to you and wanting to support you to consider is in silence. I mean, why do we feel so good when we walk quietly through nature and we go to a park or we go to woods, or some people go to the lake and they go out and sit on the water? I have a client who sits on a surfboard. They go out and sit in the water, and they said, my mind gets quiet. And I said, what if we translate? Was there a way for us to make a bridge to the rest of your life? Are there things that you could do that you might be able to do the same thing? And the interesting part, most people would say, I never even thought of that as a possibility. I come out here because I think I can't do it there. And I said, well, what would be some things we could do? One of the things I point out is get away from your desk more often. Break the pattern of sitting there communicating with a computer. Uh, go see people. Go, just take a break for yourself. Move the body and do different things. And even if you stand, go and look out the window for a minute. Just look out the window, focusing your attention on just looking out the window. The mind gets quieter, and then whatever it is that motivates you will try to probably pull you back. So when you think about it, what I'm trying to help you see is you can developmentally create a process. You can developmentally move to a higher state of presence, which means you have more command of your mind. So you move from belligerence, discomfort to desperation, usually the driving force to what's working isn't working, to courage, and that's absolutely having presence to move forward. And once you continue to do that with practice, usually about 30 days of 5 minutes a day of trying to get present, you begin to suddenly have this taste of the quiet of the mind. So it's one of those things that I try to support people because we're in a very chaotic environment right now. If you turn the news on whatsoever, you're going to find out that life's difficult. You wonder if we're going to hell in a hat basket, so to speak. Two sides are locked into self-righteousness about the other being a bad guy, and nobody knows how to actually talk to each other in a decent way. So it's a very strange time. And what I point out to people is if you can practice something as simple as this, you'll find that your ability to navigate whatever chaos is going on in the larger environment or is happening in your corporation or even at home, you have a clearer mind of what to do to know whether or not you're truly in a threatened situation. And you'll probably have a clearer idea if you truly are threatened, what to do. As I frequently say, is if you're more mindful and present to yourself, the clarity of the next action you need to do for the benefit of yourself or your family is very clear. You're not guessing what some other option is going to happen or some worst case scenario. And as a result, you move forward through it and move on. So I hope this short video will be useful to you, podcast, and I appreciate you coming. If you really like the podcast, I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe. It supports us, and you can give feedback at the bottom. I'm a little slow at times getting down to looking at all of them, but I do appreciate any comments that you have. And I'd also appreciate it if you really like the podcast, share it with somebody if you think it would be useful. So I'm Herb Stevenson. This is Natural Passages, revealing the unmarked doors of life. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with me. Have a good day. Bye bye.